You are a B2B service-based business owner and you are looking to gain more clients, create more impact, and more revenue in your business. Tune in to Amplify Your Marketing Message with Christine Campbell-Rappin. Every week, we're going to take you through how to build an audience of buyers, mastering your marketing message, and making offers that convert consistently. We'll see you all on the inside. I want to bring you a shocking truth this morning in our episode because people have choices. There's a lot of people who do similar things to what you do, but nobody does it just like you do. And it is imperative, if you want to amplify your marketing message, that you become the obvious choice for your next client, customer, or buyer to hire you. And that's why I'm so excited to bring a peer onto the show today, somebody who is a master at the messaging side, to talk to us about how do we position ourselves as the obvious choice. Because guys, guess what? We want you to be hired. Welcome to the show. This is Mr. Peter Sandeen. I'm super excited to have you. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I love this because you and I do something very similar. So this is the perfect example. We are both people who are seen by marketers as the marketing mentor on messaging, because you cannot often see your own story, and your ability to get yourself positioned in the marketplace is one of the hardest things most entrepreneurs do. But you, because you are working with peers, have a really unique perspective on how do you actually do this for yourself and do it really well. So tell us, where do we start?
Well, I think all of it starts from the target customer, how you're thinking about who you're actually targeting, and typical target market thinking or choosing your niche and such. It's helpful, but not for this part. And it's one of the key things that especially smaller companies tend to just sort of go in the wrong direction. They're thinking about it as, what do my potential customers look like to me? How would I pick them out of a crowd? And you need to know that when you're thinking of where you're going to do marketing. So are they going to be reading this magazine or this magazine? Are they going to be watching this website or this website? Are they going to be searching for this thing or this thing? So you need to know those things to figure out where to do marketing. But when you're thinking of what to say with the marketing, it doesn't usually make much of a difference what niche they're in or what market they're in. Rather, what matters is, how do they see you? What's their perspective towards you? People in the same exact market can see things very differently. They might have slightly different problems. They might have different experience of other options. They might be worried about different things. They might be looking for slightly different kind of a solution, and so on and so on. And those things are the parts that actually matter when you're thinking of what to say with marketing for them to want to buy from you and to choose you. What makes you the obvious choice is that what you're saying, everything you do, just aligns perfectly with what they are hoping that you would do and say, and how you do things.
I so love this because, boy, you're right. Do we get it wrong? And I don't think this is just small business that gets this wrong. And I say the same thing. I say to people all the time, it is important to know what a client avatar is. It is important to be able to describe them. However, helping you find them is something entirely different. And what you're suggesting, and I highly encourage everyone to pause, reflect about where you stand with your messaging, is, are you looking through the lens of what they see? Because if you cannot put yourself on the other side of the coin, you will always struggle and sound and look like everybody else. And following somebody else off a cliff is not the highly recommended business strategy. We are going to recommend to you here, we want you to be thinking about, you need to see the other side of the coin and really think about what moves them and how do they see you. I so love that. And truthfully, you also said a really interesting point, because how do you know? How do you know what people are wanting? How do you know what they're looking for? Because it's so much easier just to decide, should I be in Facebook or TikTok?
It's a good question, and I don't think there is a very clear logical answer to it. In my experience, it's as much an exercise of art as it is science. Yes, you can find a lot of answers, even helpful answers, from looking at what people are, for example, complaining about in reviews of similar services that you offer. You can see a lot from that. If they are consistently saying things like, well, I couldn't trust what they're doing, well, really make sure that what you do, everything is very trustworthy. If you're complaining about how slow it is or how much time it takes from them, then you can see that, okay, your target audience is probably concerned about time. But that can be still very misleading. So how I do it with clients usually doesn't look too much. It does a little, but doesn't look too much into what people are outwardly saying, but rather looking at the much bigger puzzle of what they have tried, what they're looking for, what their business is like, what they're trying to achieve, and so on, and make sure that everything that we then determine is a part of this avatar or this perspective they share actually fits together. So for example, if one of the things that we claim about them is that, well, they've been struggling with this crippling problem for years, but we're also claiming that they don't have experience of anything similar to what we offer, one or the other is probably wrong. Or at least if we claim that, oh, they haven't tried anything that would help with this. Like, no. They've done something, probably multiple somethings. So one or the other of these assumptions must be wrong. And my role very often is basically just looking at 400 claims like this that you make, that you have assumptions, and combine that with everything else I know about the market and the people and so on, and then see, well, which ones of these actually make sense. And ultimately, what I'm trying to look at is, well, what do you offer? How would they have to see you for that offer to be exactly what they're looking for? What would have to be true of them so that when they see your offer, they're like, oh, finally, that's what I've been looking for. Yeah, you don't have to do it that way, but it's much easier than to convince someone who doesn't really want to buy what you're offering to buy what you're offering. So if possible, and it isn't always, especially very small businesses, one of the issues may be that your offer doesn't really cater to any realistic audience, that there's something about it that is a little contradictory. For example, if the idea is that it doesn't take a lot of time, but it's a 12-month program, that those two don't usually mix very well. Even if it is only 1 hour a week, like that's still 12 months. It sounds like a lot. So like those sorts of fairly basic errors come up a fair bit, especially in smaller companies. And the reason is that it's hard to grow if you have those basic errors. It's very hard to grow. So if you're below 6 figures, below multiple 6 figures, there's a good chance that something you're doing is sort of fighting itself, or there's a mismatch between what you're offering and who you're trying to offer it to. But yeah, those are just a very basic layer. Like that, we're not yet even scratching the surface of what you actually say with marketing. This is just like, well, is there even this base level match between what you offer and who you're trying to offer it to? Because if there isn't a good match, things get very difficult.
And I love that. It's so simple because truthfully, that's often the conversation. People come and say, the issue is marketing. I said, the issue first off is a sales problem, not a marketing problem. We cannot sell something that is so contradictory. And this nugget that you shared right at the start of that, which is you were researching often a red herring, because you're going to a market who's going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. And truthfully, the first answer is never the right answer. And when you are in the world of marketing, you said there's a million, maybe 400 different things we're looking at, and we're peeling the onion, because what you think the problem, what really the problem, are often not the same thing. Because if they were that obvious, this wouldn't seem such a challenge. And it is a challenge because you are also needing to get much more specific in what is an obvious, I need that, than you are today. And the truth is, we can't see that. We often, it sounds good, and so we run with it. And one of the simplest things I'm sure you and I both do with all of our clients is this very simpler toddler logic that says, sounds good. Is it true? Tell me what that really means. Because we get caught in the spin of thinking, well, that should be true. But you're selling lollipops and unicorns, and you're wondering why it's not working. This is an important element. You must research, but there's a lot of permutations. There's a lot of variables at play. And truthfully, the most obvious ones are often not enough to move your business forward. It's got to be much more targeted. And you find that target through experience, trial and error. And that does mean a second set of eyes are really valuable. And equally important is you have to be prepared to pivot, and not pivot for the sake of pivoting, but pivoting because you're starting to build momentum. Because a lot of people, I want to take you into this path because it's interesting. A lot of people think that the goal is constant creativity. Is it to be successful in business? Is it constantly reinventing the wheel? Is it constantly changing your message every season like you're a fashion label? Talk to us a little bit about this, because I honestly think half the reason why businesses stall is because you are so busy trying to create because you're bored that you're leading the market into a massive spin. Talk to us. What do you think? Am I
Yes.
crazy?
Yeah. So generally speaking, I'd say that if you have good marketing messaging, it is very unlikely you would need to change it in the next 5 to 10 years. Basically, you don't need to change it until either you start targeting a different audience, or for some reason the existing audience starts to see things very differently, but that means they are a different audience, or you start selling something very different. So not just a new way to solve the same thing, but it's like fundamentally different kind of way to solve things. So companies that don't change those things can get great results a decade later using the exact same headlines, the exact same ads, the exact same everything, because yeah, you might want to have a slightly different updated image somewhere if it looks really old for some reason. Like if you happen to use cars in your advertising imagery, you might want to update that, because we tend to recognize old cars as somehow old. But like other than that, like that sort of trivial thing, it shouldn't need to change. And one thing I have to point out that I really like the saying of like, that's like, sounds good, but is it true? But one thing that I come across even more is, that's true, but is it meaningful? Because
Love that.
what we know to be true about what we sell is not obviously meaningful to the buyer. We might know that, or we might think that, and they might even agree that some outcome is really valuable. But if it's not really motivating for them, then why are we making a big deal out of it? It's not going to really move the needle in our marketing. So a very common thing, millions and millions of people promise that your business is going to grow. It's obviously valuable for the potential customer. No one's going to be like, well, I don't want my business to grow. I mean, some people, yes, but generally speaking, they agree it's
So
valuable.
desired.
But it's so common, it's so obvious, it's not that motivating because it doesn't stand out at all. But it might not even be so obviously motivating. It could be something like that you might see that, well, a feature in your service, or if you sell a product and feature of your product might be really valuable, and they might agree, but they're just like, well, okay, I don't really mind. I come across this all the time. People offer me some sort of services, and I can see that, well, there would be this valuable thing and this valuable thing, but I'm like, I don't care enough to actually take action. But their marketing is only telling me things that, yes, I agree, it's truthful and factually valuable, but I'm just like, that's not going to make me even reply. Or if I reply, I just say thanks, but not interested. It certainly doesn't make me start like really looking into it, or make me feel like, oh, I'm great that this thing came up because I really want that. There's a huge difference, and I think people sort of understandably miss that, because it's so weird to think that I think it's valuable, my customers think it's valuable, they even write it down as a requirement. Shouldn't I say that in marketing? Maybe not. Maybe it
And,
should
and
be
it
a
doesn't
side
create the
note.
movement. That's the thing that I think is, I know every customer, client, and person in business I know is perplexed by like, it's valuable. Why don't they buy it? And it's saying they're, because their response exactly is that is, you're right, it's valuable, and I'm not moving. And so I love this fact that you're adding that thought. Is it meaningful to me? I often bring that phrase around to, why is it a non-negotiable? Because that talks about meaning. Why now? We talked about this. I mean, Simon Sinek has been a very successful story, and I've actually met him. I had him as a keynote speaker many years ago in my career at an event I was hosting. The thing that comes around is why. It's the personal attachment. It's the meaning that creates movement. And guys, you've heard this before many times on this podcast. Our goal is movement, because movement creates momentum. And when you stay there, Peter is indicating to us that because your messaging can stay static and consistent for a long time, because here's all the biggest in business. Your job is to find a repeatable problem. If you want to be successful long-term and get an end up, you have to have a problem that is durable, that is repeated, and that is going to be around for a long period of time. Because if not, you are betting on the first mover advantage. And truthfully, there's a bigger opportunity when you are the second mover into an engine that's going to be around for a long time. And yet, you talk about, this is so obvious, but often missed. So many people don't see the inconsistencies of their message, whether that was the example where you say you have a little bit of effort, but 12-month commitment. You have this idea that it's valued, but it's not meaning. How do we miss this really simple thing that leads to trust breaks? Because gosh almighty, is this a problem?
Well, take this with a pinch of salt, because my business is built around this, but I think a big part of it is that we're trying to say too many things in marketing. We're trying to, like an example that I often use is that imagine you go buy a car and then you point at a car and ask the dealer, like, well, what is this like? And they say that, well, that's good for short trips and long trips, and it's great for individuals and family trips, and it's good for in the city and out on the highways, and it's durable and it's cool looking and it's long lasting and great value for money and great brakes and safe and ecological and blah, 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 blah. It just doesn't mean anything anymore. And it's very difficult to make it feel consistent, even if it is true. And that's the case with our own things. We see all the facets of it. We see all the great things that we've put a lot of effort into. So we can list out 100 different things, and we kind of often want to list out all the things that we've put all that effort into to make it so good. But then it's very difficult to keep it consistent. So if, for example, on one hand, we've seen that, well, we want to make it very low labor intensive for the clients, but also they clearly need long-term support. Yeah, these are both true, and maybe we can offer both. But it's if you were trying to communicate both of these at the same time, then it easily comes out as like very little work for 12 months. And it's like, no, that those don't really support each other. So it's given how much we know about our own thing is sort of the problem. So for example, when I do it with clients, I specifically don't do a lot of research until the very end of the process, where I'm really narrowing down the message. I first want to hear just answers to a few questions, form a pretty clear, specific idea of what are the key things that highlight or like get highlighted, and then fill in maybe the gaps with all the million other things that could be there, rather than start from all the million things and start to narrow it down, because that's a very difficult task to do, even for someone from the outside, let alone for the person who sees the value of every million things. I'm sure there's other reasons, but I think that's the main thing. We just have so many things we wish to be able to say that it just cannot really work. And it leads us to do the thing that makes it guaranteed not to work.
And there is truth that, remember, your goal, and this is just go back to the selling, which is partnered with marketing, is you're wanting to find the single thing people will say yes to. Because you're working for every yes. You're working for solving this problem, let's move forward. Something. Yes, we're going to take another step. Your goal is a million small quests for yes. And that is about progress. That is about movement. That is about measurement. And that's when people go, this is really valued because it's meaningful to me, because I got the result I couldn't get on my own. It is so much simpler. And it's true. I see it. I do it because I'm just, victim of my own storylines, is we overstuff. You've got to get really distilled. If you want to amplify your message, you want to really distill. I call it a pivot point, an intersection point. What's the yes in that moment? Never mind everything else, because the moment you start to add everything else, you start to lose people. And they go, that sounds like work. And it's not that we're not under the awareness that work is required, but we lose the meaning and we say, I'm going to stop because it's easier. And I love that this idea is smaller is better. When you get it right, it can be durable. And you've got to understand that it is about what's seen on the other side of the coin that matters most to kickstart movement, to stay in movement, and to get to be seen as you're the obvious choice because I understand you. That's the most powerful thing a client can say to you. And it's something Peter and I both have lots of success with. It's people come to us and say, you're so clear. I feel the stress drop. I'm prepared to do the work, but clarity is the ultimate accelerator, and making yourself this transition is really how you will see big ripples with your marketing, because it is about the message. The platform itself doesn't particularly matter. Peter, I want to know, you've got a very successful business and you're the marketer's marketer and very successful at it. What's working for you right now to get clients to work in your business and to really see big ripples right now?
Well, not just now. It has been for over a decade now that email marketing, specifically the way that I do it, has worked very well for me. Uh, so I don't send a ton of email. I might get better results if I send a lot of email, but now I usually send 1 or 2 emails a week. And my goal is, and what I think makes it work, is that I have a very high bar of what I send. I think it has to be actually useful, something that if I were to get it, I would feel like that's at least good thought-provoking idea, but also fun. And this is the part that I mean, all the other things I can say and they sound pretty obvious, but the part that very few people do is make it interesting and unexpected. So a few years ago, I don't remember how many, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when I started doing it the way I now do it, with a weekly email called Friday Scribbles, I had just read a study about what is addictive. And the point was that unexpected and inconsistent rewards are far more addictive than a consistent reward. So what I decided to do was to have what I now call the tidbits section at the end of every email, every Friday Scribble email. And it's totally random stuff. Whatever I found personally just randomly interesting or entertaining or funny or thought-provoking. And it's very rarely about business. It is sometimes, but it could be about, lately I had a couple random musings about Olympics and climbing specifically in Olympics, or it could be a music that I've enjoyed lately, or a movie that I thought was interesting, or maybe a mistake in movie writing that I thought was interesting, or it could be about some scientific study, or completely random things. And the feedback I get consistently is that people stay on, not because there's an article that is useful, because it's not useful every time, because it's impossible to write a useful article for everyone every week. It's useful every now and then, but they stick on because the tidbits are amusing or interesting or something. It's a very consistent, and yeah, people like the articles, but they love the tidbits. So
I love that.
It's something to at least consider, maybe not in that format, but think of it as like, what if people don't find value in this specific valuable article that you write? What's the point of opening the email then? And what if people for 5 weeks in a row, for example, don't get a valuable email from you? Why would they still keep opening? What can you do that is somehow unique, somehow still different? Maybe the articles are built around a funny or interesting story. Maybe there's always some, I don't know, some useful recommendations about little things that they can do. Something more. And well, at least has worked extremely well for me.
I actually think that's brilliant. I'm going to have to take credit. Everyone hear it. We are taking credit here from Peter because I love this idea for 2 reasons. One, you're right. Not every article will always be value to Buddy every week, but you have to keep people incentivized. And what I love about your personal choice of these tidbits is this is really your lens of the world, and it is a human orientated element. And you say, this is just valuable because people want to connect to me. I love that. Peter, how do people find you? Tell us where people can connect because they're going to want to be on that list and catch those tidbits on Fridays.
Go to petersandeen.com.
Guys, that's simple.
That's simple.
Notice how simple that is. Pay attention. There's a reason it's simple, and both of us have very similar styles. I absolutely loved it. Peter, thank you for being our guest on Amplify Your Marketing Message. We've been chatting about how you become the obvious choice. You've got to really look more strategically at your marketing because you're focusing on the execution and you're not spending enough time in the strategy. I will tell you, figuring out these magics of the coin on the other side, figuring out what they want that is valuable and meaningful is key. And once you get there, you've got an engine that can fire up consistently. And that's what you need to see a strong pipeline of dream clients saying, yes, I want to be on your newsletter. More importantly, I want to hire you. Thank you for Peter for being our guest, everyone. We will see you on our next episode. Until then, go amplify your marketing message. We'll see you on the inside. That's a wrap on another amazing episode of Amplify Your Marketing Message with me, your host, Christine Campbell-Rappin. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss another great episode. And be sure to visit christinecampbellrappin.com/podcast to get a free resource on how to master your marketing message. We'll see you all on our next episode.